All right. Our league serves 13 cities in the San Gabriel Valley. As a nonpartisan political organization, we encourage informed and active participation in government. The fact that we have a turnout of almost 100 people in this room is indicative, exactly. Is indicative of our vibrant members who are eager to be informed and be active. We are deep in planning how we will empower voters to be informed, engaged, and to show up to vote in the November election and beyond. As Dolores Huerta, renowned activist, so aptly said, if people don't vote, everything stays the same. And we don't want the same, do we? And so the theme of today's program is Voices from the Front Lines of Voter Engagement and Empowerment. We are fortunate to have a panel of activists who are on the front lines, organizing and engaging their communities to be involved as change agents. I would like to ask the panel if they would come up and sit at the table. And I'm glad you're bringing your coffee or whatever. We hardly gave them time to finish their breakfast. Would you all like your water? I'd like to first introduce Michael Lawson. He is president and CEO of the Los Angeles Urban League. The National Urban League is a nonpartisan civil rights organization that organizes voter education, and it has organized an education project with the slogan it's called the National Council of Negro Women. And its slogan is, a voteless people is a helpless people. The Los Angeles chapter, organized in 1921, is focused on empowering the minority community through education and employment, keeping in mind the essential power of the vote. Michael Lawson received his JD from Harvard Law School and is a retired partner of a prominent law firm. We welcome you, Michael. Our second panelist is Giovany Hernandez. He is a civic engagement specialist with the leadership organization, the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, NALEO. The NALEO Educational Fund provides leadership on key issues that affect Latino participation in the political process, including immigration and naturalization, voting rights, election reform, the census, and the appointment of qualified Latinos to top executive and judicial positions. Their message to the community is, get involved, become a citizen, register to vote, take action. And finally, I'd like to introduce Hilda Coleman. She is co-founder of the Rise to Reunite movement in Pasadena, which supports and advances the cause of immigration families. And she was the organizer and feature speaker at the June Families Belong Together March on Colorado Boulevard. She is a student at Pasadena City College and will partner with our league at PCC campus this fall for voter registration and disseminating information. And now I'd like to just give you a brief overview of what we're going to do this morning. First of all, we will ask the panel members to briefly tell about the work of their organization and provide a quick snapshot of plans for the coming election season. We will then move to a Q&A time for the audience to ask questions, and that's only 15 minutes. And finally, we will ask our audience, which is the very important part of this gathering, to get together at individual tables. They will be marked with the names of the cities we serve, and we would like you to move to the table, not necessarily of the city you live in, but maybe of a city you are willing to volunteer in. And so we will be engaging you to not only talk, but to really volunteer. So we'll see where the rubber hits the road. So as we move to our panel, I am going to ask each to answer 3 questions. First of all, what do you think is the biggest challenge or obstacle to getting voter turnout within your community? And what have you found to be the best way to overcome it? Secondly, in our current social and technological environment, what new approaches or tools do you think can be used to reach voters? And finally, how can the League of Women Voters be effective in working together with community partners? So with that, I'm going to ask Michael to begin, and then Giovany, and then finally Hilda. So Michael, we have a...
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to this very important meeting. Let me start off by thanking the members of the Los Angeles Urban League for coming up and supporting this this meeting. They're sitting at, why don't you guys all stand up, please? I hope this is an indication of how important we believe voting is, that virtually the entire staff of the Los Angeles Urban League is here and to participate in this very important meeting. And again, thank you for inviting me. The biggest challenge and obstacle to getting voter turnout within our community, quite frankly, it's apathy. It's a sense that your vote doesn't count. It's a sense that that there's nothing your vote doesn't really matter. And that sense is within the minds of people in our community by design. We are told constantly that the elections are rigged, and and the big machines have decided what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. And time again, we find out that that's not the case. This election season alone, you're seeing people who are not part of the establishment of either party winning winning primary elections, and will probably be the winners in the actual election in November. And this is not a surprise. The fact is that during the primaries, very few people vote. And so the impact of your vote is multiplied tenfold, because instead of 200,000 people voting in your community, there are 20,000 people voting, so a swing of a few votes makes a big difference. But the fact of the matter is everybody's vote counts, and we have to make sure that people know that. The Urban League has been, voting has been a big issue with respect to the Urban League since its founding in the early part of the 20th century. The Los Angeles Urban League was formed in 1921. We're coming up on our centennial. Voting has been key to what we have been about. It will be something that we're going to focus on in the upcoming election. And I don't want to hog up the microphone, because anybody who knows me knows that I could do that. So, and the best way to overcome it, it's boots on the ground. You have to touch people. You have to knock on the door. You have to talk to them. You have to introduce yourself, and ask them, are they registered? Ask them, are they going to vote? And encourage them to do so touching people makes a difference. The fact of the matter is 80% of the people don't actually read the paper. 80% of the people actually don't take the time to study the issues. They don't take the time to get to know about the candidates. And they depend upon the 20% of the people who do. And that 20% of the people in this room, they listen to you, they pay attention to you. They believe what you say because they respect the time and effort that you put into and the thought that you've put into the decisions that they are being asked to make. And if you say it's important for you to vote, they'll turn out. That is what happened in 2008 when we elected the first African-American president to this country. People came out because we touched everybody and said, you have to do this. Yes, he was the best candidate ever, of course, but but even beyond that, there were people that we had to convince. There were people that I spoke to who said, it will never happen. This will never happen. There's not enough African Americans who vote for him. There's not enough African Americans to get him to the White House, and white voters will not do it. And we just said, no, that's not the case. Trust me, come out and vote, and people lined up. This is the room that has the power to make sure that we have the voter turnout that we need. And it is up to us. It's very simple. It's boots on the ground, and it's knocking on doors, it's talking to your friends and having them talk to their friends. And it's interesting, you'll get to a point where you'll hear somebody say, well, why do you think this will happen? And that person will say, well, somebody I know talked to Michael Lawson and he said. And so it has a domino effect. The second question, very quickly, social in our current social and technological environment, what new tools do we have? We have tons of new tools, and I don't know how to work any of them. But you're probably one or two people away from somebody who does. Use those people and basically touch people in that way. And how can the League of Women Voters be effective? You guys are the gold standard. And quite frankly, we follow your lead. It's being present, it's being out there, and it's being part of that 20% that everybody else looks to for information. So and with that, it's kind of my introduction. Thank you.
Everyone, hello. Good morning. It is a great pleasure and honor to be here before you all today. Thank you so much for the invitation, the warm welcome, the delicious breakfast. And I want to thank you all again also for just your passion and your leadership for being here today. To speak and plan what you all are about to do, that's important to really bring some real change. So thank you for your leadership, absolutely, and your commitment to change. As alluded earlier, my name is Giovany Hernandez, and I am the Regional Census Campaign Manager for Naleo Educational Fund. And so I belong to our Civic Engagement Department, but my current focus right now is on our upcoming 2020 census work, which I'll give a little pitch in a bit. But first, a little bit about our organization that was established in 1981. Naleo Educational Fund is the nation's leading nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that facilitates the full participation of Latinos in the American political process, from citizenship all the way to public service. And so we have sort of like three different wings, departments within our association that helps us achieve these goals. First one being our Policy and Advocacy Research Department. The second one being our Constituency Services Department, which works with our members. We're also a membership organization for Latino and appointed elected officials. So our Constituency Services Department really works hand to hand with these elected official members of ours. And then the third department being our civic engagement department, which I'm here to focus on. And it's what's the focus of discussion for today, and the team that I belong to here in the California Civic Engagement team. And so within the Civic Engagement Department, we have sort of three pillars that guide the work that we do. And the first one being our naturalization work, just helping potential new Americans navigate the citizenship process. We host a plethora of citizenship naturalization workshops where we partner with lawyers, and we outreach to the community and help folks fill out their citizenship application for free. We help folks through the fee waiver process for free. And we also sub-grant to other organizations to do some of that work as well nationwide. So that's one of the first pillars. The second one is obviously our voter engagement work that we get involved in terms of voter registration, voter mobilization, and I'm going to dive deeper into that, so I'm going to say less right now because I'm actually going to really hit on that one in a bit. The third pillar within our civic engagement department is our census work that we do, and that's, like I mentioned, my primary focus, particularly here within LA County. That is going to be my project moving forward in terms of ensuring that there's an accurate and fair count of the Latino community in Los Angeles County. And so my job will be to roll out that work, manage that work here all across LA County, liaisoning with the county, with school districts, with the LA City Mayor's office and other municipalities within LA County as well. So big job ahead, but really important one. And in this quick digression of the census, I do want to challenge everyone to view the census as part of civic engagement. I do want to remind everyone the census is mandated by our Constitution. Therefore, it is a pillar of our democracy, right? And there are some grave ramifications that come with it, as when the census is complete, the ramifications are for 10 years, right? And it's a number of things come with it, right? And certainly it's about two things. It's about power and it's about funding, right? And there's critical funding that comes by way of data. It's how the data is used or are used that really is most important when we talk about the census. And it's critical funding that, goes into funding, programs like CalFresh, like the Children's Health Insurance Program, CHIP, right? National School Lunch Programs, funding for roads and infrastructures, and certainly funding that goes into our local educational agencies, like AKA our school districts, our schools, right? So critical funding that goes into it by way of the census data. To give you an idea, 2015, California received about $76 billion in federal funding because of census data, right? And so if we care about redistricting, right? So here we are tying it into elections, right? And voter mobilization. If we care about, like I mentioned, redistricting and the reapportionment of congressional seats, right? And as well as the seats at every level of government, local and state. If you care about that, you have to care about the census. And you have to view the census as a civic engagement effort as well. So that's my quick digression on the census. Moving along with the question here about biggest challenges and obstacles for voter turnout in our community, specifically speaking about the Latino community, I can certainly, agree with apathy. Apathy, I think, is across all cultures and demographics. I think that we can really say that for many different ethnic cultures and generations. The apathy's there. It translates throughout different demographics. I think one thing that I can definitely say unique about the Latino community is past trauma, I would say, from, either immigrants that came from other Latin American countries or past trauma that was passed on to generations here, born here, passed on from their parents or grandparents of what people lived through in their countries because of government in their own respective countries, right? We can talk about a lot of the sort of civil wars that took place in Latin America, right, in the 70s and the 80s, that really traumatized a lot of people, and I think it's created this sense of I stay away from politics kind of thing, right? And that's definitely prevalent, I can say, in the Latino community. There's a number of examples of totalitarian governments and authoritarian governments and coups that took place, and I don't want to go down that wormhole, but it's something that definitely has had an effect on our community, and I think today still that trauma still exists. So I do want to say that is something that I do believe is a challenge and obstacle when we are trying to convince folks here to participate. And particularly, let's think about how difficult that may be for immigrants that lived through some of that destabilization because of government in their countries, who then became citizens here. Do you think they want to participate in politics? No, right? So that's just this other extra layer that I feel is a little harder to overcome, but not impossible. So I'll leave it with that one example. One of the biggest ways to overcome it, as he also alluded to, is that personal touch, and I think it's that personal touch of trusted messengers that like he mentioned are all of you. It's family members, it's friends, right? Trusted messengers that can have an honest, impactful conversation with folks and mobilize folks about viewing elections as doing good for others, right? Viewing elections and voting as voting and doing something for others that can't vote as well. There is good that comes from it that many others could benefit from. I always talk about voting is not like something as that you're going to get as an individual, like you're voting for others, and we need to view it that way as well. And so I want to go into our current sort of social and technological environment in terms of how we can overcome this. I have a couple of things I'd like to touch upon. We're in this digital realm, right? This digital phase, and I've heard a lot of folks, and I've read a lot of articles that say digital is the future of elections and voter engagement. We're there. It's not the future anymore. We're there. We're there already. And there are so many examples of some recent elections, as he alluded to, that we can point to as case studies, right? So that's one piece. Like, we really need to move into that digital realm, targeting certain different demographics by the way that they receive information. So I think different groups, parties, campaigns, I think everyone needs to do a better job in terms of listening and learning how different demographics receive information, how they receive their news. You still have a certain subset of population that does rely on traditional like media outlets, TV, radio. Yes, great. Target those that way. But there's this whole other subset that doesn't rely on that relies on other mediums. So we need to do a better job of hitting different angles, period. And there is no longer a cookie cutter way of how to message any campaign anymore, how to outreach to anyone. The cookie cutter templates, they don't work anymore. And if anyone tells you they have it, they're lying to you. You just have to try different mediums. Touching on the personal touch that he mentioned, I absolutely agree with the canvassing and phone banking is still essential. There are people that will tell you, oh, that doesn't work anymore. No, it's still necessary for people that have never been touched before. One thing I do want to emphasize is if we really want to increase voter empowerment and mobilization, when we have to be intentional about our canvassing and phone banking to go touch everyone, all voters, not just targeting high propensity voters. That's what your typical campaigns do. You got to hit everyone. You have to. Because then people that are normally not touched, people that normally don't have canvassers at their doors, they're going to feel special. They're going to feel like, wow, you came to me. You came to my door. I was important enough for you to come to my door and talk to me in person. That goes a long way. And there are lots of examples of folks not being touched that are continuously neglected, ignored in election cycle after election cycle. I want to point to you to a poll that we just conducted with a partner organization. That's another thing that NALEO does. We conduct focus groups and polls, and we publish original research. And we just came out with a press release yesterday highlighting a poll, a national poll that we were working on. We're going to be releasing a weekly poll every week from now until the midterm election. And we conducted this partnering with Latino Decisions, a nationwide poll on Latinos that essentially stated one thing that kind of that proves my point that I want to make in terms of folks not being touched. With less than 2 months away from the election, the midterm election, nearly 60% of Latino registered voters reported that they have not been contacted by a campaign, political party, or organization asking them to register to vote. Nearly 60%. This is a nationwide poll. So that's something that we just released yesterday. And it makes my point of why we have to be intentional of touching everyone. We cannot just target high propensity voters for the sake of just winning a campaign. Then we're not doing any good in terms of trying to increase voter turnout or really engaging and empowering voters. So I did want to provide that example. And also, sorry, I have so much to say, but I have very limited time. I have more notes than of what I can even share. But another example that I think we really need to learn from is the 14th Congressional District seat in New York, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's victory. We really need to look at that. They really went digital. They really hit people that weren't being hit. They were hitting the ignored electorate, right? And they won. Another interesting piece of that victory is she won the white vote where many people didn't think she would win the white vote, right? In certain areas, gentrifying neighborhoods of that district, a lot of the white gentrifiers voted for her than they did for the incumbent. And so she actually won, certain communities that were, white neighborhoods, she won, where people didn't think she would win, right? So I think there's a lot of lessons learned to be learned from that victory in its own that can be applied elsewhere. And we really need to apply that. And so how can the League of Women Voters what are we doing for this upcoming election? We're doing a lot of things. Again, I don't have a lot of time to say many of the things that we're doing, but just to highlight a few, we're very involved right now with NVRD efforts with National Voter Registration Day. Our CEO is part of the board for National Voter Registration Day, and so we are actually partnering nationwide with about 86 different orgs that have agreed, that have committed to working with us on NVRD in terms of promoting National Voter Registration Day and also like just running and hosting their own voter registration efforts. So we are sort of taking this on with the partners that have agreed to partner with us on it. So that's one. Two, we have a national hotline as well. We're one of the few organizations that runs a national hotline where we provide information for folks that want to call in and just basic, folks want to know what their voting ID requirements are in the states. As we know, they vary per state. where their polling place is. If people also want to report problems at the polls, we also connect our hotline to voter protection efforts as well. So this is something that we've been doing for a very long time, and we do this nationally. So that's something that will definitely be available and operational for this midterm election. And then I did want to mention a combined Get Out the Vote and Get Out the Count experiment that we're currently conducting, getting ready to, that we're about to execute, that is in line with, concurrent with this midterm election. We're going to be running an experiment in the Inland Empire and Orange County. Those two regions. We have not decided yet on the communities in each of those regions yet, but we know those will be the two regions we will run this experiment, where essentially we're going to run a general, regular, nonpartisan get out the vote effort. We're going to have canvassers hit some doors. The goal is 8,000 attempted contacts per region, which we hope it yields 10% of actual conversations, so 800 per region. And what we want to do is we'll engage folks in a regular, general get out the vote effort, but we're also gonna, our canvassers are gonna engage those folks in a conversation about a survey that they will then receive from us. And that survey will be a just general feedback survey of how we did in our get out the vote, right? Efforts. And this will be twofold. The intention behind this is obviously mobilize, get people to vote, and then, you know, figure out what are best practices, what is it that works best with folks in terms of messaging for getting out the vote. But this will also help inform us about our census efforts for 2020. And the reason being is these people that are contacted, we are going to divide them into three groups. We want to know how folks do in terms of filling out a survey, those that get reminders and the type of reminder that they get versus those that don't get any reminders. And so the three different buckets that we'll divide folks in is group of folks that will receive a survey and a reminder like via text or phone. The second reminder will be like a mailer reminder. And the third one is no reminder. And then we're going to see what that yields. And so hopefully we'll have the analysis and findings of this by December. But we will be doing this by the midterm election. So that's something that we're doing currently. So I'm going to pass it on to our next panelist here, as I've been speaking a lot.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very honored and humbled to be here. So basically in June was when my whole life changed after the march that I planned. I didn't have any resources when I first started because a lot of the group members in my clubs weren't available. It was summer. No one wanted to come out and, you know, march for people, for families that were suffering, I guess, you know. I kind of had to pull resources from where I could, do what I could do with my own. And then Planned Parenthood reached out, which is amazing because I'm working with them as a whole too right now. And Norma Rodriguez, which she's the publicist coordinator, helped me organize that march. And it was only supposed to be 500 people who showed up, but it ended up being 2,000. And, you know, yeah. Leading those people and meeting people with cases where, you know, they would cry to me and tell me how I was changing their lives, it really moved me. And that's what Mr. Lawson was talking about, how we have to really touch people. And that's the way that they do change, that they do listen. And especially me being so young, you know, I'm 20 years old. And speaking about this, I feel like it really does. People do listen. and I had to take advantage of that. Marina Gonzalez, she's a psychologist at Pasadena City College. She's also helping me with the Rise to Reunite, which I co-founded. It's a program where we meet up every other month. Right now we're thinking 3 times a month to see how we can put our efforts to help refugees, immigrants, and people who don't have enough money to get a lawyer. So we're doing that. We have 3 different teams. We have the fundraising team, the art therapy team. So the art therapy team actually has a bunch of psychologists who are putting their time to be able to help children when we go visit detention centers, potentially, to help children with trauma. So that's what we're doing in that section. And then we have an education team, which is educating people on their rights, educating people. A lot of people don't know, the different laws that are involved with immigration. So we have the educating team, which is also reaching out to different schools. I'm actually doing a presentation in East Los Angeles College next month in a classroom just to talk about why it's so important to vote, why it's so important that what we're doing matters. So we're doing that at the Rise to Reunite. On September 4th, we raised $10,000 at a fundraiser in Los Angeles with another community organization called Al Otro Lado, which is basically a bunch of attorneys who are putting their time without getting paid to help raise money for what we're doing. So that was a blessing, a really big blessing for us. So we raised that money, and so right now what I'm doing is trying to set up a booth, which at my school, or start a campaign where students can get involved. Especially at my age, I feel like we're always on our phones, we're always on Twitter, we're always on Facebook, and I really do when I go out with my friends to kind of talk about it without them, being like, oh, like change the subject or don't talk about that. So I try not to push it, but when I can, I do. I retweet things. I change like all my profile pictures to orange, to show the gun violence, also to promote that happening. So I'm doing so many things where my friends can see the change in me, so then I could be the change that changes them. And so it's been a big change for me, but also very impactful for them because I see them retweeting sometimes. So social media is a powerful tool, and I feel like conversation is a powerful tool too. When we stop talking about things that maybe we talk about all the time, and then we move it to a subject where it's how can we change the way we're living, how can we change our society, because that's where we're going to live in the next 10 to 15 years. So what I'm doing right now, what do you think is the biggest challenge, obstacle? I would say it's getting students involved in my community, in my school especially. I want to do banners. We have this board where students can put anything like apartments that they have for rent or announcements. So I made flyers for my Rise to Reunite organization, so I'm putting those up at school. I made stickers for November that say vote. So I have things ready. I'm waiting for November, and I'm waiting for the League of Women Voters reached out to me, and any resources that I can have are great for me, so I'm so glad they did because they're going to help me with the essentials to set up a booth in November, and to talk to students and get a team of students who are driven like me about this topic and who really care about it, because I'm so passionate about it, and I don't think people understand how much I really, really want this vote to change how we're living right now. So that's what I think would be the biggest struggle, is getting people to talk about it, getting people to actually care, my age of students and people to care. So let's see. The tools, I think, to approach this is social media, which is, I already have a grasp on that. Social media, banners at my school, flyers, getting a lot of the important people like the psychologist that I have in contact with, Marina Gonzalez. Planned Parenthood also said that if I ever needed, to promote anything, they'll put it on their page. So that's amazing. And yeah, so I feel like I have a good set of resources around me. And I know I'm young, but I think that makes up for a lot of things. And so I think people are surprised. People are surprised with the fact that I'm so involved in the community, and I'm so involved and passionate. That's like the number one thing. Passionate about this. And how can the League of Women Voters be effective in working together with community partners? Just them having my back already, being supportive, having everything I need if I need it, would definitely help me with my voice and the change. So thank you.
Terrific. They may say that it takes a village, but a village starts with one person, doesn't it, huh? Yeah, very, very great. Thank you to each of you. I would move now to question and answers unless any of you wish to add something to your previous remarks. Anybody want the mic back? Or okay.
I actually have one.
Good, Michael. Good.
I just wanted to add to a couple of comments that were made about the census. The census is critically important. And in addition to the issues that Mr. Hernandez mentioned, it has a political implication. The last census was 2010. It was a mid-year election just like this one. And candidly, the Democrats dropped the ball. And the Republicans picked up, I believe, 45 governorships. And those governors were allowed to use the census data to gerrymander their districts, to ensure that they would have a Republican majority in Congress, and they did a great job at doing what they wanted to do. One example is Austin, Texas, which is a very liberal city. It is represented by 4 members of Congress, all of them Republican, because they cut Austin up into 4 different districts and made sure that there were rural parts outside of Austin, there were parts of that district. And so the votes within the city were the minority votes in that particular district. That was by design, and it was legal, and it was done. And this morning driving in, I heard a radio report about what's going on in South Carolina. The Justice Department is pulling the voting records of millions of voters in South Carolina for whatever bogus pretext. Thank you very much. But this is just intimidation. This is not new. This is something that has been going on since the 14th Amendment, quite frankly. So we need to be very diligent about it. We need to be our eyes open about the tactics that are being taken to prevent us from voting, to discourage us from voting, and overcome them by doing what we're talking about in this session. But I just wanted to mention those 2 very real, very current examples of what is going on from an institutional standpoint to minimize our vote. So if in addition we actually don't vote, it's problematic. You add to that the photo requirement for voting that is being looked at in a number of states, and I have to remind people when they say, well, what's the problem with that? You just want to be able to identify folk. The only people they're going to challenge are Mr. Hernandez and me. Everybody else they're going to say, oh, you don't have a photo ID? Don't worry about it. Vote. And so we have to be, this is a very difficult time for us, but we have been in difficult times before. And to Ms. Coleman, you are the embodiment of what we did in the 60s. So keep it going.
Just one quick thing. I didn't get to answer how we can partner with, the League of Women Voters. And I think one of the things in where we can partner is Naleo demonstrates leadership by also crafting messaging, right? I mentioned the original research, the focus groups and polls that we do. We use that to help inform us in messaging that we then craft and disseminate to organizations, that we disseminate out to groups that are interested in reaching and outreaching to the Latino community. So that's somewhere where we can partner and help provide messaging for the League of Women Voters on how to reach Latino electorates. That's one. Two, we can extend our Rock the Vote platform and our text messaging platform that we have. That's an area where we can partner there as well in that digital front. And then we're always happy to partner with groups on co-hosting candidate forums and whatnot. So, I'm a big believer in collaboration and partnership. So we're always happy to partner with groups. So definitely count on us.
I just wanted to quickly add, we also always are accepting volunteers. So if any of you would like to volunteer, helping with this organization, Rise to Reunite, just let me know, come talk to me. And we do meetings I'm sorry? No, there's no age limit. There's no age limit. There's the three organizations, or the three groups, which is we have the fundraising, the therapy, and then the educating. So if any of you guys would like to volunteer, then just let me know. That'd be great.
Well, thank you again. I think we need to give a hand to all of our panelists again. There's Catherine. Catherine, I'd like you to handle the mic for those who have a Q&A. But I just want to add before we go on, I couldn't help but focus on the comments about gerrymandering. We have a little gerrymandering in our own community. Our cities have a district for the first time. And we need to look at the maps that were used for the voting in our own cities. It isn't just happening in South Carolina, etc., but it's happening in our back door. So I hope we all are aware of what's happening in our own cities and to respond to that. Okay, with that, we'll open up for question and answer.
I'm with an organization that promotes, it's difficult for me to stand up, promotes women running for office, and we attempt to help candidates. Can you explain whether or not you think it is helpful to encourage vote by mail to your respective groups? I participated in a GOTV effort for Ana Cubas running for the Senate, in which I think the turnout was like 13%. In an area that had a lot of recently citizens, naturalized citizens from El Salvador, which she was targeting, and they attempted to get the voters to vote by mail. They didn't do that, and they also tried to offer them rides, and that didn't work either. So what can we do to try and increase turnout?
In answer to your first question about vote by mail, absolutely support vote by mail. It's not as, it is as effective as voting in person. The process around counting those votes is a little bit different because it takes some time to actually review the vote by mail ballots, but yes, I would absolutely encourage people to vote by mail. And I think what is going on in South Carolina is indicative of how important vote by mail is The Republicans are using that as they can't trace the ballots that were voted in person back to the people that voted. So they're focusing on the vote by mail, and they're using that to intimidate people to not vote. And the only way to respond to that is to ignore the intimidation and go ahead and vote. What we will do from the Urban League standpoint, and what from the National Urban League as well, and I know the League of Women Voters would support this, is that we will do whatever we can to protect the identity of the people who are voting, so that they cannot be intimidated for how they vote. But we can't back down from this form of intimidation, and that's exactly what it is a form of intimidation. But voting by mail should be promoted, especially for those who have difficulty getting to the polls.
Thank you for your question. So I absolutely agree with Mr. Lawson. To your question, is it helpful to push vote by mail? Absolutely. I always push for it. There's on the doors, I've always come across people that they cannot get to the polls. They don't have rides. Family members can't take them. A plethora of reasons that exist why folks can't make it to the polls. I also have found that there is a lot of education that I think we need to do around vote by mail to our electorate. I think we really need to push vote by mail, like education to folks. It's the easiest way to vote, and that's what I always tell people, like, you know, hey, you're busy working, whatever, you're sick, doesn't matter, like, get it out of the way a couple of weeks before, just put it in the mail. It's the easiest form, and I think we really got to drive an education component to vote by mail. And I think we need to change the perspective and culture of how, or habits of voting. A lot of people, like I mentioned, don't know that they can vote by mail still, but two, we're seeing other counties in California that are strictly going vote by mail, where they're eliminating polling places, right? So we got to get our folks used to the concept of vote by mail. So I definitely encourage pushing it for sure.
I would just say, yeah, like they said, it's really effective, and I think that I can even add that to the educating factor when I go to schools, talking about how to vote in mail and, yeah, everything that involves that.
How do we educate the inner city, the people of the inner city, of what's going on in the political system, who people are, what's going to be on the ballots and things like that? Because most of the time, we're not touched, the people that are in the urban areas. And quite frankly, most people don't even know what to vote for, because they don't see any changes in our communities, no matter which president or which representative we have for years. So a lot of times we don't get out to vote because we don't see a change in our communities.
Thank you for that question. There are a lot of different layers to the question that you asked. And it goes to the heart of why vote, which is the response that you get. Oftentimes I hear I didn't vote because I didn't like either candidate or wasn't moved by any particular candidate. And I have to remind people that the only time I had an opportunity to vote for a candidate that I really liked was 2008 and 2012. Every other time it was the lesser of two evils. And I think this election in 2016, I hope people realize that there is a difference between the lesser of two evils. The lesser of two evils is an important metric that we need to pay attention to. So yes, we have to make people realize that there are consequences to allowing the greater of the two evils into office. The other point that you raised is also a very important one. The ballots are confusing. This last the last vote that we had, I think there were 17 people running for governor, and it was insane. And in this coming election, there's a proposition on the ballot, Prop 10, which if you just look at the tagline, it is supposed to ensure rent control. Well, actually what it does is it repeals another proposition that limited the ability of local communities to pass their own rent control legislation. So in fact, what it does is eliminate rent control so that the local communities can then write their own legislation. So Proposition 10 in and of itself does not impose rent control. That's a confusing message. And I'm not criticizing the people who supported Prop 10, who are pushing it because it is part of California's bizarre structure that a proposition is a change in the Constitution that can only be changed with another proposition. And so we have ourselves in this situation where you're explaining to people that this will allow local government to improve the rent control situation in your particular neighborhood if the local politicians do so. So it's a first step in kind of a complicated chess move, but it's important. I will be shocked if the summary of Prop 10 on the ballot is anywhere close to explaining that process. And so it's extremely confusing. What a lot of people do, and this is what I do, is you look for, those flyers from politicians that you respect. They say, here's a list here's what you should do. Vote yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And those things can be confusing, but to a certain extent, that's everybody in this room. Because you're not going to be able to explain to people why on every particular one. They're going to say, what should I do? And you say, here's how I'm going to vote, and here's what you should do. But it requires everybody in this room to do their homework. Pick the candidates that they think people should vote for, and insist that there's no such thing as I didn't understand, so I didn't vote. You have to vote, and that's the key that people need to know. Especially during the midterms when most people don't vote, we have to get people out to vote, and we have to at least tell them what we're going to do and hope that they follow along. And if they need more explanation, we find a way to give them that. And it's actually interesting that in this era where there is so much information available on the internet, available at your fingertips, available through all of these social platforms, that people that people don't look for that. They still look to you because you're a trusted friend. And so we need to be that trusted friend and encourage them to vote.
That's a great question, and we could literally be here all day, because it's very complex. One of the things that I will offer that in terms of a solution on how to touch people in the inner cities and urban areas that are not being touched, so many folks that don't know that there's even an election or what's on the ballot, right? Don't know any of the names of any candidates, right? You name it. We can list all of these things. And I come across that all the time, for sure. One of the things I always tell everyone that I talk to when I talk about this specific topic is, and this is my personal opinion and belief, is if we really want to change this, it's a generational thing. And we have to focus on the youth and we got to focus on middle school, high school students. And we have to be okay with, if we go that route, that we're not going to see immediate changes, but that it's a long-term game. A long-term game where we're then, that work, if we do it right, by hitting younger people, kids, high school, teenagers, that in the long run, years from now, we would have increased the voter turnout. And I think we need to be okay with that. The reason I say this is I've in my experience on the doors and talking to many different voters across the state, there are a particular group of folks, once you're a grown-up, whatever age of a grown-up, you might be jaded. You might be already stuck in your own habits. So why not focus on a particular subset of folks that are your future voters and educate them and teach them about the responsibility of civic engagement? Why not just let's do a full frontal assault campaign there, and let's see what wields from that. Why not? And I think with that, no. It's not about giving up on a particular age group. Please don't misconstrue that. Please do not misconstrue that. But we're not doing the work in our schools. We're not. Let's be real. Let's be very honest about this. This work is not happening. Like true nonpartisan civic engagement work is not happening in our schools. Period. No, there's no civics. No civics. It's been eliminated. And we need to change the systems, all the different school districts, to do this again. So we really care about long-term civic engagement and people participating and empowering voters. We have to do the work there. So I'll leave it at that.
They kind of covered everything, you know. But I feel like more close to proximity with students. So I feel like that is a big thing that I'm doing is, you know, putting that at my school where it's something we need to do. It's like vote, and so that's my whole right now in the fall is what I'm gonna be focused on. So I will definitely make sure to do that at my school. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much to each of you. I just wanted to add that we do have a thing in California, a service called votersedge.com, and that's a wonderful resource to not only find out about the candidates who are running, but about the propositions as well. And one of the best features is it tells you where the money's coming from. So who is supporting the particular proposition and or candidate. And as part of our civic engagement service, we do give sessions on the pros and cons of the propositions. And our wonderful Robbie Davis, who can never get away from us, has agreed to coordinate that so that we are ready to give sessions when invited. But what I'm hearing today is there's communities we have to make sure we're connecting with our pro and con presentations. So I think that we are doing a good job, but we have so much more.